So some words about how we met Schell Games and how we work together. So the relationship started like November 2011. We started working together for the toy train company for Lionel. So we did together the first digital game experience they had. So they wanted to jump into the gaming world and the digital world, and so they asked the creative heads at Schell to create a game around the brand, and we built that together. So so we created a really unique and fascinating experience, something new. Jesse likes to call that the tower defense on rail, which is like the new, I would say, new kind of game. And so now that the game has been released, and we are now working to support the game, bringing more concepts and mechanics to the game. And at the same time, we're working hand in hand with the team at Schell Games on an educational game project for iOS and Android. So, few words about Jesse. So, first, thank you, Jesse, for joining. Really happy to have you here, and really glad to have you in this Q&A with us. So, for the few people that don't know Jesse yet, so Jesse is an American game designer. I can say, for having working with him, that he really like impressed me in the way he can think and see games and the vision he has about games. So he's the founder and CEO of Schell Games, the leader game studio in Pennsylvania, and at the same time is heading and leading at Carnegie Mellon Institute the game design and game development area. So maybe Jesse, if you want to add a few more words about you, say hello.
Yeah, hi. I'm definitely glad to be here today. I'm glad I can answer some questions and be a part of this today.
One with the first question yet. So I would be the one passing questions to questions and explaining who has been asked the question. So people are on the other side of the webinar. Thank you for all the questions you sent. We really received plenty of questions. So we had to select just to pick the 10 most interesting. So sorry for the people that don't have the question picked. That could be for another session maybe. So first question, we had a question from Juan, game designer. So he wanted to know how can GameSprout help indie and amateur designers to create great experiences. So maybe Jesse, if you want to give a few words about GameSprout and then answer the question, it's all yours.
Sure. GameSprout is a system that we created here at Schell Games that is designed to allow people to meet each other and to work together on independent game projects. It's designed for all levels, whether you're totally new to game design and development or whether you're an experienced developer. You can just go to gamesprout.com, and the idea is you put your ideas up and you get feedback from all the other participants who are there about what they think is good, what they think could be better. And if people get excited about your idea, very often people kind of start teaming up and working together. So it really is just kind of an open-ended place that people can get together and work on games together.
So I would just jump to the next question then. So more generic question, and I think this is where many people are interested to understand what are the key skills a game designer must have. So it's a question from Hannibal, QAnon.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I know a lot of people are interested in becoming game designers, and they haven't, they don't necessarily understand, like, how do I go about it? What do I have to get good at? And there's a lot of answers to it because different game designers approach games very differently, right? Because when you're talking about particularly video game design, you need to have skills in a number of different areas. You know, because when you look at all the skills that go into a game, and when you're designing a game, you need to have some facility with all of those skills. Some of that is art, some of that is programming, some of that is music, some of it is architecture and anthropology and psychology. There's all kinds of things. The list just goes on and on with all the things that game designers need to be able to know something about. And then on top of that, understanding about game mechanics and what makes games fun. And it can seem really daunting because there's so many different skills that you need to have some facility with, that it sounds like it can be kind of scary. But the truth is that different game designers are different, and they have different areas of specialty. But the most important skill for all game designers comes down to strong communication skills. Because unless you're going to be working completely alone and doing everything yourself, you're going to be working on a team. And if you're not good at working on a team and kind of connecting with that team and getting everybody working together on the same vision, you're going to have real problems getting anywhere. So I would say first and foremost, it comes down to being able to work well with other people towards a creative vision is the fundamental skill that underlies everything else. And once you have that, if you study games and what makes them fun, and you learn what you can about the other things that you care about, you're going to be in a really good place. If you look at really famous game designers, they come from different backgrounds. Some of them come from, computer science background. That was certainly the background I had. Others, you look at Will Wright, for example. He had an architecture background. Brian Reynolds is an example. He had a background in history. There's really lots of designers who have lots of different backgrounds, but it comes down to how can you channel what you know and what you're good at into making an interesting game, and then how can you work with a team of people in order to get it done.
And I think there's so many answers, and I think it's really great to have you all today. So just a quick parenthesis, guys. So we have this Q&A window in the webinar if you want to post some questions that we will have later in the Q&A session. We have those 10 questions, and then we can move to additional questions that we will be posting in the Q&A window. So Jesse, another question from Alejandro, one of our product manager and game producer. And knowing Alejandro here as a game designer background, so you understand the question where it comes from. So we wanted to understand what activities do you do to improve your creative process when the muse, I would say the creative muse, is nowhere to be found.
Right, that's a good question. I mean, it's when you're even just working on one game, you need to come up with so many different ideas, and there are times you get stuck in a rut and you just can't find your way out of what you're doing. And there are different people do lots of different things. One of the ones that I'm big on is sleep. Sleep is really important because we think of sleep as if nothing is happening in our brains, but really an awful lot is happening in our brains. Think of all the dreaming that goes on during sleep, and think of, where do your good creative ideas come from? They come from the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is the king of sleep, is in charge of the sleeping world. So a lot of times the answer isn't, stay up all night working on it when you don't have a good idea. The answer instead is, go to bed early and think about something else, and definitely change your scene, change your perspective, go somewhere different, talk to someone different. I often like to bring my game design problems to people who don't know anything about it and start talking to them and get a fresh idea about it, because good ideas can come from anywhere. The most important thing I always think is to respect your subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind wants to help you solve these problems. And if you formally explain, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, and then you don't harp on it. You just go work on something else. A lot of times the answer will just show up when you least expect it.
Veronica, project manager. And I think it's a really interesting area that we will be exploring with this question, which is about e-learning and how, I would say, education and gaming can change the way the education, I would say, works. So the question is, she's interested in your experiences with e-learning applications. If you can just share maybe experiences, success cases you had, best and worst practices about building, I would say, a gamified gaming experience on like gamification and the word itself, but the way that game mechanics can be applied to educational, I would say, systems and mechanics.
Yeah, sure. At Schell Games, I would say about 2/3 of what we do are educational, or we often use the phrase transformational games, because the thing we like to focus on is games that are designed to change people in some way. And we've done a number of these, and we have more in progress right now. Some of the more interesting ones we've done, we did a game called Play Forward for Yale University, which was designed to help reduce the incidence of HIV infection in young teenagers, which is sort of an unusual kind of education, but it's a kind of education and transformation nonetheless. The key to that game is the key to all the transformational games that we work on is that you always have to begin by asking yourself the question, what is the transformation that I really want to happen to the player? And it's not enough to just say something like, well, I want them to learn math. Well, what math do you want them to learn? And in fact, when you say learn it, do you mean know about it or be able to solve certain kinds of problems or apply it in certain circumstances? You need to get down to real specifics about how do I want people to be different after they played the game than before they played the game? And I find it is often quite difficult to get people to focus on this. So one game that we're doing right now is a game called Lexica that is a game for middle school students, and it's a big RPG designed to get kids to read more. And I don't mean read text in the game. The goal is, the transformation that we want is that after students have spent time playing this game, we want them to read books more often and more frequently and enjoy them more. And so this is a tough challenge. And the way we approached it was, okay, well, we know the change we want is that we want them to read more, but how is that change going to happen? And we started doing research about it and learning that the reasons a lot of middle school kids don't read is that there are these different barriers to their reading. They don't feel confident in it, or they haven't found a book that they enjoy. There's a number of these barriers. And so then we designed game mechanics that are designed one by one to address these different barriers and take down the barriers. And that's the way you need to do this kind of design. It's very challenging. It's very difficult because you've got all the challenges that a teacher has combined with all the challenges that a game developer has at the same time. But when it works out, it's very rewarding.
Right. So following, I would say, the questions about gaming and education. So we have a question from Joe, principal. He would like to, the question is, what do you envision happening in regards to gaming and the implementation into the K-12 market? How will this affect education, good or, I would say, positively or negatively?
Yeah, this is a thing that's been on a lot of people's minds lately. It's certainly something that's on our minds here at Schell Games. What I think is definitely going to happen is we are going to see tablets take on a very important role in the schools. I think it's going to happen for a number of reasons. One is that tablets are becoming very affordable. And when you look at the relative cost of tablets compared to the textbooks and how much textbooks traditionally cost and how many textbooks a school has to buy and manage and maintain, the notion of just giving each student a tablet that at a minimum has the textbook on it is something that's very appealing to schools, and particularly as the prices are coming down, because there's so many advantages that tablets have over textbooks. They can be more up to date, they can integrate video content, the teacher can more easily keep track of what's going on with homework, etc. And once they have these tablets, suddenly there's a window to be able to get gaming into the schools. And we've had gaming in the schools before because schools have had some number of computers in them, but the computers have never been very well integrated. Tablets are going to be integrated in a very special way because schools are going to be able to guarantee that every student has one, every student is networked, and the teachers will have them too. So you'll have the teachers and students on a ubiquitous network, constantly connected. That's a whole new idea. And once that happens, it opens the door for a lot of really interesting gaming experiences. Now, how the market's going to work is a hard question because we've never had a market exactly like this before. My guess is it's initially going to be dominated by the textbook companies in most cases because that's how schools are used to purchasing their content. And that market is going to be radically different than what we know as the traditional app market. And part of what's tricky is certainly this is certainly true in the United States, and I know it's true in many other countries, that individual school districts are the ones who make the decision about what curriculum content they're going to buy. And so any company that wants to kind of sell to these companies has a very difficult sales job ahead of them. So exactly how this is all going to roll out is very unclear, but the part that's very clear to me is the technology is coming into the schools, and there is going to be a demand for high-quality educational games that are both connected to the curriculum and also maybe not so tightly connected to the curriculum. The point of view we're taking here at Schell is that we're going to keep focusing on how do you create great games, and we're going to keep an eye on the market, and we figure if we keep finding ways to create great games, that we'll find a way to sell them.
So question from Manolo, CEO. So let's keep in the same area, right? So he's saying, and he's stating that educational gaming has proven to be a good way to learn and master knowledge. Examples like Lumosity, for instance, are just incredible. Do you see, and once again it's about the market, right? Do you see the market looking for more smart games other than just entertaining games?
This is a really good question. So Lumosity is an interesting example because it's not something sold to schools. It's something sold directly to consumers. And the challenge with creating educational games that you sell direct to consumers is that there are only narrow varieties. There are only a few types of games that really seem to work and be successful. Certainly we see that preschool games are very successful. Games for children 6 and under, there are lots of parents who want to give their kids an advantage in going to school, and they're willing to spend $4 or $20 on apps and games in order to give their kids an advantage. And then we see lots of adult education products. So Lumosity is one example. We see things like Rosetta Stone, language learning for adults. But we don't see, you don't see things like, here's a great physics education system for adults. I think the thing you want to look at is what are the educational book sales that have traditionally done well direct to consumer. Those will translate. Those translate pretty well. But the general educational market isn't necessarily going to be open that way. And certainly, if you look at children ages 7 to 18, they are not generally interested in educational games at all, and the parents usually aren't very interested in trying to push it on them because they know the kids probably aren't going to play them. So there are all these strange gaps in these markets, and this is something that everybody's kind of exploring and experimenting with together. The markets are always going to be there for educational games. The challenge is the market going to be big enough to really make the expense of developing a successful product worth the effort? That's the thing that we're all trying to figure out. And a big part of the problem in the tablet space is there's such an emphasis on free-to-play right now. And free-to-play educational games, that doesn't always make a lot of sense. But if the norm becomes that all games should be free, you end up with real challenges. in the educational space. So I think the market is looking for these things, but I think we all have to be very cautious and very clever about how we find ways to present them and make them work.
Moving to another, I would say, interesting area, and I think you will love this question, as we loved it. So we have Guido, CPO, asking us, how will games, both gaming and gamification, affect civic participation? And how can games help us have a better democracy? That's
right. We've already seen a lot of examples of social networking becoming involved in elements of civic participation and in aspects of democracy, and so that's pretty interesting. But having games be a part of that, that's something where that's a place games don't usually go. There have been some examples. You can look at Ian Bagost's book. He wrote a book called Persuasive Games, where he takes a look at games that are designed to get people to immerse in different points of view and to persuade them about certain viewpoints. And there's some interesting examples there. One of the things I've become very interested in is a notion called deliberative democracy. I know some professors at Carnegie Mellon who have studied this quite a lot. The notion of deliberative democracy is that if you just poll people about certain topics, you'll get very different answers than if you educate them about the topics and then poll them. And the idea of deliberative democracy is, let's not just poll people about a question, let's have them spend half a day kind of hearing both sides of the argument and think it through and then poll them. And I find that really fascinating. They did an interesting study about how do people feel about gay marriage, for instance. And the poll results were sort of startling because with the people they just simply polled who didn't think about it, they were very much against it, on the whole. But when they had people who spent half a day just thinking about it, hearing arguments from both sides, they ended up being more for it. And so that's interesting. And the challenge of making this sort of thing work comes down to kind of a media distribution and organizing, getting people to be organized challenge. And I feel like there's some way that games can be involved in this notion, but it's a tricky business. One of the things that we know games are good at is showing points of view, showing the world from different people's points of view. And there have been some excellent examples out there. If you've seen the Half the Sky game that Zynga.org had worked on, it's an interesting example talking about issues of women's issues and slavery issues. So I think there are a lot of opportunities out there to create and be a part of these games, but we're all still exploring to figure out, what's the best path and how can games be most helpful in these conversations.
So you wanted to understand, since you have worked on working with virtual reality during your time in Disney, you wanted to understand, what do you think about the Oculus Rift? And do you expect that we are having some kind of home virtual reality revolution coming? How do you see that happening?
Well, I'm there already. I'm doing this video conference through my Oculus Rift right now. So I think we really do have a VR revolution that is going to be coming. I've been doing more and more experiments with what the new technology can provide. What's interesting is the technology is not very different than it was 20 years ago. It's just so much cheaper. A system like this that costs about $300 right now cost about $300,000 about 15 years ago. And suddenly we've got, the same power of the technology, but so much cheaper. So I do think it is coming, but it's, and I think that the people who are going to engage in it and use it the most are going to be the sorts of people who are kind of really into Steam and kind of hardcore gamers, because there are a lot of advantages that come from a head-mounted display for the sorts of games that hardcore gamers like. one of the things I'm trying to get people to think about gaming a little differently. People tend to think about game systems, and game systems change a lot, and that's the wrong way to think about things. The right way to think about it is to think of what I call venues. Where are the places in your life that you're going to play games? So, as an example, we talk about consoles and console gaming, but really what we're talking about is gaming in the living room, the part of the home I tend to call the hearth, right? The sort of the fire that everybody gathers around. I don't think the head-mounted display is going to work very well in the living room, in the hearth, because that's a place where people come together and they need that kind of personal connection. The problem with the head-mounted display, it's a very isolating device. It cuts you off from the rest of the world, and that's not what people want in the living room. However, it is what people want at a part of the home I call the workbench. When you look at where PC gaming is now, there's a lot of talk about bringing PC gaming into the living room, but I don't think PC gaming wants to be in the living room. PC gaming wants to be in a part of the house where you're off by yourself, you're very private, you're very isolated, and you're working hard. That's kind of the workbench part of the house. And I think that there really is a place for head-mounted displays there, because they do create powerful experiences. And then when you combine that with some of the new technology, it's not just that you can have a good display on your head. It's the question comes down to your physical interaction. Now, when you take a system like this and then you combine it with something like the Kinect or something like the Leap Motion that can detect your finger movements, you start to move toward a world where not only can I see it and it's all around me, but I can actually reach out into it. And that combination is going to allow for some really powerful gameplay. So I think it is coming. I'm not going to say it's going to take over, but I think it's going to be a very important part of the gaming. It's going to be a facet, an aspect of gaming. It's going to be an important market within the next, I will say, 5 to 10 years. We're going to see it become a very important market.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's see if your prediction are right. Last time you made predictions about the application, it happened. So let's see this time if it will happen. So next question, the question from Andres, our CSO. So you would like to know, how would you embed gameplay core loops in the development lifecycle of non-game application to create stronger user experiences?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot. People always wondering about, well, how can we use gameplay mechanics in experiences that aren't really games in order to make them stronger? And the key I always come back to is what makes gameplay loops work is that gameplay loops are good at giving you pleasure and giving you anticipation of pleasure that is to come. You play the loop, you play the game because you come back to it because there's some problem you're going to solve, and when it's solved, you're going to feel good about yourself. Or there's a set of tasks, when they're completed, you're going to feel accomplished, right? There's some pleasurable feeling that's always at the center of these core loops, and often it's more than one. They kind of connect together into a system. And so when you're trying to figure out how can I take gameplay loops and put them into things that aren't games, you're not really asking about gameplay loops. What you really, the real question you should be asking is how can I enhance the pleasures that are in the user experience that I'm trying to create? So, for example, someone might be working on a program for doing your taxes, right? TurboTax or something, some kind of program for filling out tax forms. And you might say, well, there's nothing fun in that. There's no way I could make a gameplay experience there. And you could just jam in a bunch of weird gameplay experiences, and it would seem kind of tacked on. It wouldn't seem very good. But if you look at the tax experience and say, well, is there anything that's pleasurable in here? And yeah, there are moments in filling out a tax form that are pleasurable. The moment when you realize, hey, I'm going to get a refund, that's a very pleasurable moment. And certainly the the feeling of, wow, I'm all done. Everything is finished, and this is all done, and everything is just neat and tidy, and I feel like my financial life is a little more organized. That's a good feeling too. So you have to look and find what are those pleasures, and then say, okay, now how can I make those better? How can I kind of amp them up? Because that's what games do. Games exaggerate things, and they kind of take things up a level, right? That's what you want to do. You find the core pleasures in the activity that you have, and then you figure out how can I do what a game designer would do in order to enhance them and bring them out, emphasize them, celebrate the good moments, console you when you've had a setback, and make it clear where you should start. All the good things that games do, find ways to do those. And it's not so much an issue of game design, it's really just an issue of good design.
All right. Next question. So I wanted to close, or to wrap up a bit the first 10 questions with that more open questions about the future, right? So we talked about virtual reality. And so here Charlie is asking, this is a mix of different questions we had on the topic, but what are the biggest, what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing or you face heading into 2014? And I would say same for the gaming platform. We had this transition to mobile, and now what else? What would be the next platform, the next big platform? Would it be smart TV? Would it be the Oculus Rift, etc.? What do you see?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge for most of the industry is dealing with free-to-play games. Free-to-play games are really hard to get right, and at the same time, we see them taking over market after market after market. We watched them take over elements of web gaming. Then we saw them take over the app stores, and I think we're going to be seeing them stepping into the console area next. And the challenge of free-to-play gaming is that it's really hard to do well and to do right. It's a very delicate balancing act because it's very easy to make free-to-play games that really irritate people. But on the other hand, if you do it right, they can be very, very profitable. But it's very difficult. And then also, part of the problem with free-to-play gaming is once people get a taste of it, they expect everything to be free. But the problem is there's lots of games that don't want to be free-to-play games. And so I often find myself in the position of coming up with, our team will come up with a great game idea, and we say, wow, this is really great. And if it was 5 years ago and we could make an $8 app on iPad that anybody would pay any money for, just like Plants vs. Zombies was $8 when it came out, this would be perfect, except we can't do that anymore. You look at Plants vs. Zombies 2, they decided they had to go free to play. That wasn't a game that really wanted to be free to play, and unfortunately, it did okay. It didn't do great. So one of the problems we have to deal with is the market, sort of forbids certain kinds of gameplay. And if you want to create those kinds of games, where are you going to go? It's one of the things that has an advantage right now that we, in Steam, is that free to play doesn't really seem to be working there. So there is a place where people can make games for $8, $15, $20, and you don't have to sell 10 million units in order to be profitable. You could maybe sell, 50 or 100,000 units and be profitable. But if that market changes too, then what's left? So the whole issue of how does free-to-play get integrated, I think, is something everybody has to wrestle with. In terms of the next gaming platform, I think we're going to see a number of platforms show up at once. And the thing that with technology is technology always diverges. It doesn't generally converge. It generally splits out and fragments into lots of different places. So I do think head mount is going to be something that the hardcore market is going to be going after. I think augmented reality platforms, there are maybe in the next 18 months, I think I know 5 or 6 that are going to be coming out onto the market. and nobody's quite sure who these are for or what they're really good at. It's something new, and there is some powerful gameplay in overlaying three-dimensional objects into the real world that you're looking at. My personal feeling is augmented reality platforms are going to be very good for children. I think it's a kind of play that kids are going to be really into. I think the 7 to 12 market is going to think it's really great fun to chase little virtual creatures all around their house, because they're not going to be embarrassed running around their house after a little virtual character they're trying to catch with their hands. But hardcore grown-up gamers might feel weird about that. They would feel uncomfortable. So I'm foreseeing head mount for the adults and augmented reality for the kids. And then at the same time, we've got the cloud gaming platforms that are sneaking up on us. And they may serve to blow the consoles out of the water, but it's really hard to say how that's going to happen, how that's going to go down. It is a bit easy for me to imagine them being just integrated, as you mentioned, TV, integrated into the TV. If I can play every existing console game through my TV and not have to have any console at all, that's incredibly convenient. But the question and the trade-off is, am I happy just using a game console, a game controller, or am I going to have a desire to have motion controllers and be out on the cutting edge with that? That's what makes all this stuff really hard to predict.
So now we've been picking some of the questions we received on the during Q&A. So let me select some of the questions we found most interesting. I mean, doesn't mean that the other are not interesting, but we have to make a choice. So something I would like to have your opinion on is a question we had from Martin, UX designer. How do you think and how do you envision user experience as part of the game design process? And how do you design games and have UX, user experience, part of the creative development and process?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people are starting to talk about, so the notion of UX design, user experience design, has become very trendy and fashionable in the design world. And people are wondering, how do the principles of UX design and game design, how do they fit together? The answer is mostly that really they're the same thing. I mean, when you're designing a game, you're designing a user experience. So in a lot of ways, you're talking about the same stuff. Now, some people, when they talk about UX design, they really are talking about, well, the user interface aspects of the game. But really, those things sort of flow together, because when you're interacting with the game, you're doing it through the UI. So I guess to my mind, like UX design, game design, it's really very much the same thing. Design is design is design. What works what works for good design in one medium tends to work in the others. So the good part about that is if you learn more about game design, it makes you a better UX designer. And if you learn more about UX design, it makes you a better game designer.
Sounds fair. So good question from Juan, game designer. So, and I have the same question. I mean, can you give examples of free-to-play games made right? I mean, enjoyable, good games, and games that you want to buy. I mean, you want to make enough purchases.
Well, this is all a question of what do you mean by done right. On one level, you can just look at, hey, take a look at the games that are making money, because they're done right. People are playing them, people want to play them, and people are spending money on them. And they wouldn't spend money on them if they didn't think it was worth doing. If you look at the ones that are out there and doing well, each one of them has found a psychological hook of some kind that really sticks with people, right? So, for example, I think Puzzle and Dragons is a really interesting game that way. The hook that they figured out was the notion of sort of, it sounds bad, but that game is very much founded on fear of regret. One of the things that human beings do, they like to optimize against regret. They don't want to regret their actions. And so you have situations in Puzzle and Dragons where you're going through a dungeon, you've got a bunch of treasure, and then, you have found a tough monster, and now you're dead. And the game says, well, that's too bad that you're dead. You're going to lose all these treasures that you found in the dungeon. But you know what? If you pay just a little money right now, you can keep going, and you won't have lost all that hard work that you've already accumulated. And that's the thing where people feel like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to lose that, and they're willing to put the money up. Candy Crush Saga is another interesting example. They did a lot of things really smart in that game, in terms of the way they get you to kind of purchase more and more lives in the game. It's tough because it's very easy for these games to feel like it's a sort of cheating when you play them, and one answer is, hey, if you don't like that feeling, then don't pay the money, go do something else. But as designers, we can manage it. One that I'm very impressed with is Dungeons and Dragons Online. They did something really smart. So there are a lot of games where, you might be playing the game and the game says, hey, there's a dragon in the cave. Why don't you go fight him? And you go and try and fight him, and you do too hard, and you lose. And the game says, oh, that's too bad. Well, you know what? If you spend $5 on this magic battle axe, then maybe you can beat him. So you say, all right, and you spend $5, and you buy the magic battle axe, and you go and you beat the dragon. And so now, what have you got? Magic battle axe, and you beat the dragon. But you feel a little bad because you feel like you paid money in order to win. Well, the Dungeons and Dragons guys did something different. They said, hey, there's a dragon in the cave. Do you want to fight him? Costs $5 to go fight him. And you say, well, I'm here to play a game. I might as well spend the $5. So you spend the $5. You go and fight him. It's really hard. And then eventually you beat him, and he's got a treasure trove. And in the treasure trove, guess what? There's a magic battle axe. And now you have a magic battle axe. Now, at the end of the day, in both of these games, you paid $5, you beat the dragon, and you have a magic battle axe. But in one of them, you feel like you earned it, and another one, you feel like you cheated. And so that's the stuff that makes this free-to-play so tricky, because it all hinges on these weird little psychological these tipping points.
Now, moving into something which is really trendy. What do you think about, I would say, independent game development, and how the indie developer can, I would say, reach success as the companies reach success? For instance, like EA with FIFA, obviously, this is I would say, the huge success case in the game industry. Like, but what do you think about game, I would say, independent game development and indie gaming?
Yeah, so that's one of the most exciting things that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years is really the sort of explosion of independent game designers and developers. It makes for a very weird marketplace, because in the marketplace right now, particularly if you look at the places where the indies can really get their games in, where the things that are very open that anybody can submit to, you end up with a situation where a tremendous number of people in the marketplace don't care if they lose money, right? If some guy's already got a job and he's just making this game on the side, and he spent 2 years making the game by himself, and he puts it out there, and it's just kind of a hobby for him, if he loses money, he might not even think very hard about whether he's priced his game properly, etc. And so it's exciting because we get this huge diversity of games, but it makes the marketplace so incredibly intense. And that's what everybody's trying to figure out, is like, how do we, is this kind of indie, will this sort of, right now it's very trendy. We have a lot of trendy indie game developers. What will the market look like 5 years from now? Who's going to survive? What will the culture be like? I think it's going to settle down, and we're going to have a great diversity of people making games. But I think what's so exciting. 10 years ago, you used to always hear people complaining that there wasn't enough creativity, there wasn't enough originality in the game design world. You never hear anybody saying that now because there's just so much stuff out there that nobody can even keep up. Now we have the harder question of, you know, how can people make money and how can people survive at this and sort of, you know, have a sustainable business. That's the big challenge for indies is kind of making a sustainable business out of it.
Yeah, and I think this is a question that many people have, that we all want to start our indie, I would say, indie project. So we don't have much more time, so maybe one or two more questions. So there's a question I have here from Andres, and I really like it because it's really my background. What do you think, I mean, about the use of agile methodologies in the game development process and cycle?
Yeah, it's been interesting watching agile development has really taken over the game development world. Agile is incredibly important for game development because it's so hard to plan games out from the beginning. Some kinds of software can be planned out from the start. You know what you want. You know how it's going to work. You get a sense of how the user interface is going to work. I think all software development benefits somewhat from Agile, but game development benefits so much more because games change so much while you are working on them. And so the core tenets of Agile development, things like setting frequent, small deadlines, constantly reevaluating whether what you're doing is the right thing or whether you should change your direction, having a feature backlog as opposed to a complete list of features, but rather a feature backlog where you're prioritizing and you're doing the most important features first and you're gradually working your way down to less important features. It's for any kind of team development, it's really crucial, but it is difficult to manage. The mistake a lot of people make with Agile development is they only look at what they're doing in the next couple of weeks. They don't plan out any further. And if you have any kind of deadline at all, whether you're trying to hit Christmas or finish your game before you run out of money or whatever, you need to do a mixture of that sprint to sprint Agile, but you also need to do a little bit of long-term planning so that you have a destination, so you can make sure that you're going to be able to get to some kind of destination. And this is, I think, a big part of what makes game development so very challenging.
Now, just asking, what is the game you're most expecting right now? What is the game you're just dying to play?
Oh, yeah, in terms of new games coming out, wow, that's a tough question because there's a lot of really interesting stuff coming out. I need to get caught up more than anything else. I've been really interested. I'm always interested in games that take storytelling to new places. I want to check out the Two Souls, Beyond Two Souls. I haven't had a chance to play that yet. And the other one is Device 6. I've been hearing everybody talk about it, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and play it. So I'm eager to check both of those out.
I think this is all for today. So thanks a lot, Jesse, and thanks everyone for participating in this webinar and posting the questions we had today. Really interesting to have you here. So Jesse, if people want to know more about what you do, what you've been doing in the past, where can they go? What is the website they should check? What is the address they can see more about you?
Yeah, the best thing is to check out my website, which is jesseschell.com. I've got a lot of information there about where I teach and what I do at the studio, and you can find all the talks I've given. I have dozens of different online video talks that you can check out and download there, and information about my book. Everything you can find right there at jesseschell.com.
Okay, thank you. And I really encourage everyone here in the webinar that wants to, I would say, know more about game design and game mechanics to read your book. The Art of Game Design, really, really great book. All right. We're done. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Jesse. I think Jesse will see you. We'll talk in a few for other things. And thanks everyone for participating with us today. It was really great time to have together. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming, everybody.
All right.